Our program this evening is Get Out the Vote 2020. Our program presenters, Ed Spire and Jim McGrath, are both election judges and are knowledgeable about the new Illinois voting law. They will answer all your questions on voting by mail. Following their presentation, we will discuss how we can get out the vote during a pandemic. And now we'll turn the presentation over to Jim McGrath and Ed Spire.
Okay, let me find my presentation here. No, hang on. I don't know what happened to it.
And we have a number of different areas that we participate in. Jim, can we move to the snowflake side, please? So we have a bunch of different groups that work on different areas, such as gun violence prevention, women's issues. We have a group that does a good job of describing fiscal issues for the state and for the federal government. We have a group for climate control. Jim and I run a group called Restore Our Democracy. We began this group to talk about the corrupting influence of money in politics. But given the current situation, we're spending most of our time talking about improving our democracy through our voting procedure and voting by mail. So Jim's going to go through a number of slides to talk about how the law has changed here in Illinois recently, and how we can all participate more effectively through voting by mail or voting in person if that's your preference. And after Jim's presentation, we'll be ready to take questions. Jim, please go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Okay, one thing that we want to address first is this, all the noise about vote by mail fraud. There's no documented evidence that this actually happens. And we use the one example is Oregon, the pioneer. Everybody in Oregon gets a vote by mail ballot. They've had over 100 million ballots since they started in 2000. They've had about only a dozen proven cases of fraud. That comes down to about one fraudulent ballot per 8 million ballots cast. So that will not change the election in any way. And there's a lot of data from a place called the Brennan Center, which if you're interested, and I will provide this slide deck to the group so you can use these links. But here's a link to that study that the Brennan Center did. And then if you can recall all the noise again after the 2016 election about all the fraud that had happened, they only were able to find 4 documented cases of fraud out of all the millions of votes that were cast. So our election system is pretty secure. So you have to choose how you want to vote. And we're going to talk mostly about voting by mail, but we can also talk about voting in person. But voting by mail by the U.S. Postal Service, USPS, you vote in person either on election day or at early voting. And because of all the problems that we're hearing about with the post office, Illinois has implemented something called a drop box. It's a secure way to return your vote by mail ballot, but not using the post office. And we'll talk about where those boxes will be located as we get into the presentation. So step 1, just something that you have to make sure that you are registered to vote. If you have moved, if you've changed your name, change your address, anything, you can go to this website. The top website is where you register to vote, but on that same website is a link to check your registration lookup. And if you find that information on that registration lookup is not correct, you can update it. You may have to fill out a paper form, depending on how your county clerk is set up. But you know, this is step one. Just make sure you are registered and registered where you live. So what happened? There was a very short legislative session this year. It was 3 or 4 days, and in that time, they were able to pass, both houses passed a bill called SB 1863. That was the vote by mail bill. So it passed, and then on June 16th, Governor Pritzker signed it into law. And the way this bill was written was that once JB signed it, it would become effective immediately. So he signed it on the 16th. It became effective on the 16th. If you want to look it up, you can write this down and Google that public act. Once a bill becomes law, it changes to something called a public act. And it was the 101st Congress in Springfield, and this is the law number. So built right into the bill is this language, and you can see what I've highlighted in red is the legislature wanted everybody to vote early. The concern is COVID is going to come back. COVID is going to, and we want everybody to have a virus-free, safe election. So everybody's encouraged to cast their ballot prior to election day, either by mail or during or early voting. So, okay, that's built right into the bill. So this is in the law. So this is what happened on the 16th. The first day to file, you can see the second paragraph on the left. First day to file was August 5th. The new law changed that to June 16th because they wanted to give everybody as much time as we could to fill out the applications for your vote by mail ballot. You have to apply for your vote by mail ballot. It will not just be sent to you. You can check all this out at this website here. This is the elections website. So again, and there's some confusion. We are referring to this as vote by mail or VBM, vote by mail. It is also called absentee voting. Absentee voting, you have to make a request, which is what we have to do here in Illinois. Some states you have to have an excuse. Why do you want to vote absentee? Illinois did away with that, I think, in 2010. So it's just called a vote by mail ballot at this time, but you have to request it. So again, the second bullet, we want to make sure that this election is virus-free as possible for all voters and election judges. Ed will say at some point in this that we actually don't want you to show up at the polls. We want the election judges to be virus-free as well. So we want you to vote ahead of time. What we want to avoid happening is what happened in Wisconsin and some other states when they held their primaries. So Wisconsin did their primary on April 7th. And what happened was because of COVID, all the election judges, except just a few, refused to serve. So in Milwaukee, they had to take and close 180 polling places. They only had enough election judges to handle 5, to open 5 polling places. In Green Bay, they had to consolidate 32 into just 2 polling places. Now, Ed and I both have a story. I'm in Barrington. I was working in one of the polling places here in Barrington. The polling place that was supposed to open in our village hall, every election judge refused to show up. So they had to go and scout out and get election judges to go on. They finally opened the voting, that polling place about 9 o'clock in the morning. And Ed, do you want to tell your story?
Well, in my case, I was assigned as an equipment manager to be supporting 10 polling places so that I would be available to drive to any polling place and help them with an equipment problem. And this was over in the Skokie neighborhood. So one of the polling places over there, nobody showed up. None of the election judges showed up. And, you know, when that kind of thing happens, you get a call from downtown. They say, get yourself over there and get that polling place open because we want to be open on time. So I was not able to support 10 different polling places. I just ended up running that polling place pretty much by myself all day. So this has happened here. We are working to recruit additional judges. We're working to recruit younger judges, and we'll talk more about that. But Tuesday could be a problem, which is why we really don't want people to wait till Tuesday, and we really don't want people to show up in person at all if possible, because the more people show up in person, the more likely it is there's going to be some kind of virus transmission, and voting by mail is the way to do this where everybody will be safe. Back to you, Jim.
So the other main reason that the vote by mail is important is there's voters who are not able to travel to the polling place. They're either they're bedridden, they're in a hospital, or they're in a nursing home, whatever. But so this will allow everybody's to vote and everybody's vote to be counted. So this is the way the bill was written. This bill applies only to the November 3rd election. It goes away the first of the year in 2021. So one of the things that Ed and I will be working on after this election is we're hoping that the vote by mail is a success and that we can get enough support with the legislature to make this an option for just for all future elections. So it requires all election jurisdictions to mail or email a vote by mail ballot application by August 1st. If you had voted in 2018, 2019, or 2020 in the primary, you should have gotten this application. It's a paper application. You can fill that out and mail it in. We highly recommend that the better way is to go to your county clerk's election jurisdiction and apply online. Why? Because you will know before you're done that you've entered everything correctly. If you enter anything correctly, the site will not accept your application. So you can go back and make corrections. But the other reason is if you fill it out by hand and somebody in the clerk's office is trying to read your writing and enter it for your application, and if they can't get it right, if they can't, you may not get your vote by mail ballot. So it requires the Secretary of State to send out a follow-up by September 15th to all who received a vote by mail ballot application but did not respond with the paper ballot. Now, I just got some feedback today that somebody that we did a presentation for about a month ago applied for a vote by mail ballot, but just got this letter. So I've got to track that down for them. So I'm not sure. There's probably some disconnect between the Secretary of State and the Lake County County Clerk's office.
I will comment on that. We have 3 voters in my home, and 2 of them requested vote by mail ballots. I did not, since I'm going to run an early voting site. I will vote at my early voting site. I got a reminder today. The other 2 voters in my house did not. So that seems to be working just fine from my point of view. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, good. Okay, so here, when you complete your vote by mail ballot, it's supposed to be returned by mail or United States Postal Service or at these new optional collection sites. We're referring to them as drop boxes. They're locked metal boxes placed at a location at the discretion of the local election officials. There is no requirement in this new law of where to place these drop boxes. Some are being put outside. We can say that in suburban Cook and in Chicago, they will be located in the early voting sites, but you will have to go into the building. Will County is going to be locating these in library locations. Just to confirm, if you want to use one of these drop boxes and not the post office, and you don't know where the drop boxes are, call your election jurisdiction. Call your county clerk and ask for for where the nearest location is to where you are. Now this this was added as part of the law for curbside voting. Check with your county clerk to see if it's offered in your jurisdiction. Ed has apparently handled this a couple times with special requests as required, but the Cook County clerk is not planning to make this a generally accepted procedure.
Well, let me address that, Jim.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, there's always the possibility of bringing someone who can't get out of the car, and you drive them to the polling place, their usual precinct polling place, and a couple of election judges, one from each party, can bring a paper ballot out to the car and allow them to vote. That's always been there. It's still there now. The idea of allowing curbside voting on a wider basis than that, perhaps during early voting, is not being done in the Chicago municipal area. That's really an optional thing, and the election authorities that I've talked to say that it's really more appropriate for the more rural populations with the lower level of population. So you could do it on Tuesday, but you won't be able to do it during early voting, not in the Chicago area.
So the early voting sites, the law requires them to be open by October 19th. Chicago is decided to open theirs early on October 14th, and some jurisdictions are actually opening early voting sometimes in the county courthouse on the 24th, so a week from today. So it makes Election Day a holiday for the public schools and the post-secondary institutions governed by the state, and for all government offices except for the officers of the election authorities. There's been some confusion with this. Some people are saying it's a state holiday. It's not really a state holiday unless your employer says it is for you. So don't assume that your employer is giving you the day off. This is what the law says, that it applies to only the schools. Now that's a good thing, because some of the polling places have been in schools, and with some of these people that like to go in and shoot up schools, that's always been a concern. So the fact that now the children will not be present on Election Day takes that concern away. We don't have to worry about that. So allows local election officials to extend early voting, in other words, open before the 19th, which I just said there's a number of jurisdictions that are doing that. Requires at least one voting super site per jurisdiction. What that means is when you go to an early voting site, you're not actually voting in your precinct. So the early voting sites have to be set up to handle the ballot where you live. And everybody's precinct can have a different ballot based on the people that are running. So the super sites will be an early voting site. The Cook County is going to have two. Chicago is going to have a couple. Haven't checked into, I think DuPage has got one at the county courthouse, or maybe I think it's at the fairgrounds, I'm sorry. But again, if you need to check that, where your super site is, again, call your county clerk.
And the point about the super site, it's just the same thing as an early voting site. But what it means is that if your precinct has a really long line, or if your precinct polling place doesn't open for some reason, or if it's just not all that easy for you to get to it, you can also go to one of these super sites, even if it's just Tuesday and not early voting. There'll still be one of these super sites where you can go to and get your ballot and vote. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. So we are still very short of the total number of election judges that we need. To give you a couple examples that I'm familiar with, Suburban Cook needs 8,000 judges. We have about 5,000 that have signed up. Chicago needs 12,000 election judges. And I think they've got about 6,000 or 8,000 that have signed up. But to be an election judge, you have to be an election judge. You can only be an election judge in the jurisdiction where you will vote. So in other words, I live in suburban Cook. I can't be an election judge in DuPage. Okay. But if you know anybody that's 16 years or older who would like to be, now remember they're going to have the day off. If they would like to be an election judge, and depending on which jurisdiction, I think DuPage is going to pay like $230. I think suburban Cook pays like $220. For a 16-year-old kid, that could be a good deal. So they have to go through some training to understand how everything works, but we need election judges. And if we can get election judges as young as 16, what we're hoping is they will stay in the system for quite some time. When you mail in your vote by mail ballot, you have to sign the outside of the envelope. And when that arrives at where the ballot is going to be counted, there'll be 3 election judges who will verify that your signature is correct. All 3 of them have to agree that the signature on the envelope matches the signature that's on file. They all have to agree that, they all have to agree that it is not acceptable. If one of them agrees that it is acceptable and the other 2 disagree, it's accepted. Okay, all 3 have to agree that it's in order to disqualify that vote by mail ballot.
And by three, we mean they won't all be from the same party. There's always 2 from one party and 1 from another. So that helps make sure that we don't get ballots being disqualified on a partisan basis.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, so what reason Ed and I are doing this is obviously we're trying to encourage people to request a vote by mail ballot, request it online, and request it sooner than later. We would suggest that if you can, when this presentation ends tonight, when the meeting's over, that you go to your county clerk's website, if you haven't already requested your vote by mail ballot, to do it tonight. Here's why. The horizontal line represents what is a hypothetical capacity to process all of these requests and mail these ballots back out. If everybody waits till the end of September, and we're getting right there now, then all these, you're going to get a whole lot of requests that won't be fulfilled. And this vertical line represents voting day. And all this red on the right side of that vertical line represents people that will not get their ballots. That happened in Wisconsin for their primary. When they got concerned about COVID, people started applying for vote by mail ballot, and the election jurisdiction just couldn't handle it. So a lot of people, what you heard, again, a lot of the people that don't support vote by mail made a big point out of that all these people didn't get their ballots. Well, there's only finite capacity to get these ballots out. And if you wait till the last minute, you might be one that doesn't get it. Okay, ballots will be mailed out starting a week from today, September 24th. So that's why we're asking that you do this right away. Now, the law says that the last day to apply for a vote by mail ballot is October 29th. That is way too late, especially with the nonsense that's going on with the post office. So you can figure something's going to take at least 7 days each way. So don't wait. Let's do it now, please, if you're thinking about this at all. This is a chart that's again available on. This is the Better Government Association. They are showing the October 29th date, but again, please don't wait for that date. Apply now. Apply in the next couple days. Apply tonight. So again, just summarizing what we've talked about. So make sure your registration is up to date. You must be registered where you vote registered to vote where you live. Go to your county clerk's website to apply for vote by mail ballot. or complete and return the paper application that you got. Track your status online. Now, if you are able to give if you do it online, you will be asked to provide your email address. And your election jurisdiction will, when they receive it, will send you an email back saying, we got your application. When they send the ballot out, they're supposed to send you an email saying, we've mailed your ballot to you. When you return it, they will send you an email that says, we got your ballot. Or,
Now, what Jim just described is what's going to happen in suburban Cook. They're going to confirm the process through emails. Different jurisdictions do it differently. If you're in Chicago, when you submit your ballot, you're going to get a receipt, and it's going to have a receipt number on it. You can put that receipt number into a website. So different jurisdictions will do this differently, but every jurisdiction will have a way for you to track your email ballot one way or another to make sure that it was received and it was accepted.
So one of the things that I'd like to make everybody aware of is there's a new website. It's called virusfreevotingillinois.org. Some people put together this website. It has links to all 108 voting or election jurisdictions in Illinois. And every one of those links will take you to the place to apply online for a vote by mail ballot. Now, some of these smaller communities, you may have to print out a request, but at least it will take you to that location. So if you have friends that live outside of the metro area, you can just tell them to go to virusfreevotingillinois.org and get the information that they need, no matter where they live in the state of Illinois. Okay, as we said before, the ballots will be mailed on September 24th. If you don't have your vote by mail ballot by the 10th, October 10th, call your county clerk. Now, if you just mailed in your application or on the 9th, obviously you're not going to get it on the 10th. But so that's, again, do it now using the return mail envelope that's provided when you get your vote by mail ballot. You have to sign and date the outside. You have to seal the envelope. If the jurisdiction gets the envelope and it's not sealed, they will not know if what's contained in that envelope is what you put in that envelope. So they will reject that. Okay, so our suggestion is to use a secure drop box, deliver it directly to your county clerk's office. If you're going to use the post office, don't drop it in the mailbox. Walk it into the post office, hand it to the counter clerk, ask him to postmark it for you, and make sure and watch him postmark it. Ask for a receipt when you do that. It has to be postmarked by the end of day, November 3rd. If you don't get your vote by mail ballot, you may still have to vote in person. Now, if you do get your vote by mail ballot and you damage it in any way, or you decide you actually want to vote in person, you can do that. But what you have to do is bring the vote by mail ballot to your polling place with the envelope. You have to bring everything you got, and you have to turn it in to the election judges. They will spoil that ballot and allow you to vote again. Now, if you don't have it and you still and you haven't got your vote by mail ballot, and but the election judges will know that you applied for a vote by mail ballot, but you didn't get it, you can still go to your polling place and you can still vote, but you will vote on based on what's called a provisional ballot. That means that ballot will be counted after the other ballots, because they have to verify that you haven't already submitted a vote by mail ballot. So they have to make sure that you have not already voted. They don't have anything from you. So they save that to the last. If you have not voted any other way, then they will count that provisional ballot. So if you've not done this before, I'm just using this as an example. Some of the ballots will look different. This is the way my ballot happens to look. This is from Franklin County, Illinois. You can see there's a little oval here. You have to color that in. Don't put an X in it. The scanner won't read it. I had a voter at the primary put X's in. I tried running it through the scanner for him, and the scanner rejected it. You can see down here, this one has 2 candidates. I had another voter that voted for, filled one in, and then decided he wanted to vote for the other candidate. So I tried to erase it. Let nice big smear there. Put it through the scanner. The scanner rejected it. So I had to give him, in each of these cases, I had to give each of these people another ballot to vote. So,
Hang on there.
Yeah, go ahead.
The point is this: when you get a mail ballot, read the instructions carefully, because what Jim was saying is when you're voting in person, if you've done something wrong, Jim can tell you this isn't going to work here, try it again. But when you vote by mail, you're not there, and you won't be, it's not so easy to get it fixed. So if you make a mistake on a ballot, a vote by mail ballot, then you might have a hard time fixing it. So just be very careful when you get a vote by mail ballot to read the instructions carefully and fill it out properly. That's all. Thank you.
So in conclusion, just remember, your voice is your vote. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Don't stand on the sidelines. Don't let all this nonsense about voter fraud and all this other stuff scare you away from voting. Understand the issues and the candidates. Use your voice and vote. There's another link I'd like to make you aware of. This is for the Chicago area. It's a commit to vote. You click on this, you go to this site, and you fill out the form. Put your name and all this kind of, your address and stuff. And what will happen with that is someone will call you to make sure that you did vote, or you do have a plan to vote.
Or you need help voting.
So the other sites don't have the personal touch. This one is has a personal touch that people will follow up because we want people to vote. Here's links to every election jurisdiction in the area. That virusfreevotingillinois.org contains all of this. So you can either try to remember all this stuff or just remember virusfreevotingillinois.org and you're all set.
And we'll send this presentation out to you folks so that you'll have all these links at hand.
Yep, we'll do. So here's some other resources on vote by mail fraud. We already talked about the Brennan Center. The New York Times, Stanford University has something, and here's another one from Nonprofit Quarterly. But you can Google vote by mail fraud, and there's so much information out there that just says vote by mail fraud does not exist. Okay, we really appreciate your attendance, and I think the group has another presentation to follow this. Do you want to do questions now or after? How do you want to handle that?
Let's take questions now. I'm not seeing a lot of questions in the chat.
I hope that's good.
So we do have one now. Marty Sladek wants to know, have you seen the postcard being sent out by the USPS?
I have seen it. I received one. I know that there is a little bit of controversy about that, and that has to do with some jurisdictions where the information on the postcard doesn't really quite align with the local jurisdiction's information. When I looked at that postcard, I didn't see anything wrong with it. It was encouraging people to vote early. It was telling you that they're going to do everything it can in the post office to accommodate them. It was asking you to make sure that you send your things in early. I did notice that in Colorado, some of the information on the postcard that the post office sent out wasn't quite the same as what the county had sent out, what the county was supporting. So every jurisdiction in the country has different rules about when and where and how you vote. And I can understand there might be a little bit of confusion about that. But I saw the post office efforts as honest, as trying to make sure that they discharge their duties to support vote by mail. And I personally didn't have a problem with it.
Okay, we have another one. She heard about postmark issues in Wisconsin's primary. What was that, and is that something we need to be concerned about?
It absolutely is something to be concerned about. There was a situation in Wisconsin where, for one reason or another, a whole bunch of ballots showed up with no postmarks on them. And the law in Wisconsin says that it's got to be postmarked by election day or you can't count it. So there was tens of thousands of ballots that were not going to be counted. And people had to go to court and get a court ruling to require the election jurisdictions to count those ballots anyway. Now, here in Illinois, I mean, that's the difference between a red state and a blue state. Here in Illinois, our election laws are very flexible, and we want people to vote. What I have been told by the election authorities in suburban Cook is that if they get a ballot that doesn't have a postmark, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the date that it was signed and use that date that the voters signed it and dated it as the date it was delivered. But I don't know if that's going to be true in every jurisdiction in Illinois. So that's why Jim said that if you're going to use the post office to send your ballot back, please walk it into the post office, give it to a clerk, ask the clerk to make sure that it has a postmark of today so that there's no question about this postmark issue.
Yeah, just let me add something to that too, Ed. The Illinois law allows all these voting jurisdictions, now this is every jurisdiction in Illinois, if they get the ballot by November 17th, 2 weeks after the polls close, they have to count that ballot. Now, some states, if the ballot is not received by the end of voting on election day, then they don't have to count it. Illinois wants everybody to vote and wants everybody's vote to count. So they've got some flexibility. Again, if you're going to mail it, again, we suggest use the drop boxes. That's the best alternative if you're going to use a vote by mail ballot.
And I'm seeing questions in the chat. I'll just address them directly. Should I put a first-class stamp on the ballot? Well, we want you to walk into the post office and speak to the clerk. Some of these ballots are using postage prepaid envelopes, so you may not have to put a stamp on it. Some of them might not have a stamp, and you might need 2 stamps. So when you bring it in and give it to the clerk is going to help you make sure that you have the right postage on it, whether you need postage or whether you have to apply 1 or 2 first-class stamps. Please don't just throw it in a mailbox assuming that it's going to work. We don't know if that's going to work or not. The next question I see in the chat is, if we can put ballots in drop boxes, those aren't be postmarked. Well, that's true. But I believe that every jurisdiction is going to handle that properly. I know that as an early voting election judge, I run an early voting site out in sleepy Elk Grove Village. And I understand that I'm going to have a drop box at my early voting site, and every day a bonded courier is going to show up and empty the drop box with my cooperation. So we count the votes and make sure you know how many ballots are in that box, and they all go downtown. And when they come downtown through this bonded courier, they're accepted as having been delivered on that date. So the county is certainly not going to require a postmark on a ballot that's been put in a drop box. And I expect the drop boxes should be the very best way to return a ballot, because there's no question about how long it's going to take that ballot to end up downtown and getting counted. And one other thing I'll say about that is we really want you to bring the ballots in early as possible. And the reason is that in Illinois, we're going to review those ballots and scan them when they come in. We're not going to wait till Tuesday, because we expect tens of thousands of mail ballots. We're not going to wait till Tuesday to scan them. We're going to wait till Tuesday to tabulate the results. We're going to wait till Tuesday to say anything to anybody about how many came in or who they voted for. But as an example, I served as a poll watcher in Wisconsin earlier in August to watch how they handle mail ballots. This was in participation with one of the political parties in Wisconsin. They just wait till election day, and they don't look at the ballots until election day. And if they have tons of ballots on election day, they're gonna have to process them all on election day. They might have a hard time doing the validation and scanning all at once. We don't do that here in Illinois. We process them as they come in. So if all y'all, and by the way, I was in Texas for a long time ago, I know that all y'all is a plural. If all y'all will send your ballots in early, we'll scan them early, and we'll be all set to come up with a total on Tuesday night. And that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to have a sound total on Tuesday night. So please send your ballots in early. Okay, what else is in the chat?
So somebody wants to know, can the ballots be dropped off at all the county clerk's offices in Illinois?
I believe that's true. I mean, they don't talk about that much, but when I was calling around to the 6 county courthouses to find out what the options were, who was going to have drop boxes or not. And just about everybody I talked to said, well, we're not sure if we have a drop box yet or not, but you can always just bring it in here and give it to us. So you can just bring it in and give it to your county clerk. But, for instance, I have a friend who lives in Lake County, and she said, well, that's that way up in Waukegan. I'm not driving up there. And the traffic is terrible getting up there. There's no place to park. So yeah, you can do that. But if you have drop boxes nearby, that's probably better. Now, Chicago and Cook County and DuPage are going to have drop boxes at all the early voting sites. So that's probably going to be a little better than actually walking it into the county office.
Somebody else asks, I've lost it here. Is there a concern that the volume of vote by mail will be too high to count with manual checking the signatures in a timely fashion?
I don't think so. From what I'm seeing in Chicago and Cook County, which are the 2 most populous counties, I think we got this. The only reason there'd be a problem is if a lot of folks wait until the last day to send in their ballot. If we get 20,000 ballots, 30,000 ballots coming in on the last day, we might have a problem. But I'm hoping that won't happen. I'm hoping that we'll all send our ballots in early. And if you send them in even a week before, if you put them in a drop box during early voting, early voting, most of the early voting occurs for 2 weeks before the election. If you bring it in the middle of the first week of early voting, we're not going to have any trouble at all counting in time. So if the population does the right thing, it's going to be okay.
And along the same line, someone asked if Illinois can receive ballots until November 17th, how long after the election will it be before all the votes are counted?
Well, the point is this. If on election day, we have a decision where we say one side won over another by 150,000 votes, and then ballots continue to trickle in, as long as you don't get 150,000 additional ballots, it couldn't possibly change the result. So, I mean, you won't know for sure. You won't know absolutely for sure for 2 weeks. But unless it's really close, you'll probably know on Tuesday night.
Okay, and one more. Is a voter contacted if there's an issue with their ballot, like the signature?
Absolutely. For example, in Cook County, when we send emails 3 times. We send an email to you when we send you your ballot. We send you an email when we get your ballot back from you. And we send you an email when we've looked at your ballot and decided whether we like it or not. And that 3rd email will either tell you, we accept your ballot, it will be counted, or it'll tell you, there's a problem with this ballot, you got to do something about it. Now, I will say that, and I think every district by law, by the new Illinois law, every district has 2 days to respond to your ballot and let you know one way or another whether there's a problem with it or not. And I will say, as much as I was concerned about the situation in Wisconsin where they were waiting till the last day to count them all, they were bending over backwards to find voters. They would they would not only try and call them and email them, they would try and find them on social media. And they were really doing the best they could to ensure that everybody gets to vote. And that's encouraging to me, because mostly the people who do the kind of work Jim and I do to help the voting go smoothly, we're doing that because we support democracy. We want everybody to vote, and it's really kind of a patriotic thing. And I was very encouraged that the folks up in Wisconsin are doing as the best they can under the laws that their state has provided. Any more? Oh, it says here, I see
Go ahead,
what
I'm sorry.
I see a message here that's a private message. Who's in charge of the boxes? Can someone fill out a ballot and substitute it for that box? Well, let me say this about that. First of all, the drop boxes in Chicago and in Cook County are going to be inside the early voting sites, and the early voting judges there are responsible for ensuring the security of those boxes. We're going to make sure they're locked up overnight, and that the data inside them is transferred in a as secure a manner as any other ballots are ever secured. But as far as somebody stuffing a ballot box, I mean, you can't just print up a ballot. You have to receive an official ballot in the mail, and you have to be a registered voter before you can receive an official ballot in the mail. So I'm not worried that you're going to see anybody trying to stuff ballots in a ballot drop box. That's not a significant risk.
Doesn't every ballot have a unique number?
The outside envelope does.
Yeah.
The ballot is anonymous, but the transmission envelope is coded as to you. So
Right.
that when we get an envelope in, we know who it came from, and we can mark your registration record to say that we got a ballot from you. But then we separate the ballot from the envelope. Once we accept it, we put it in a stack with all the other ballots, and that way your vote is private. But in fact, we do know where this ballot came from. That's correct.
So this nonsense about ballots being printed in foreign countries and they're gonna flood, that's not gonna happen, because you have to have that unique number or barcode. It has to be in an envelope that the jurisdiction sent to you. It can't be just a ballot. That's not gonna work.
All right, what else?
Another one about fraud. Can precinct captains in Chicago who know who has died in the past year request the ballots of these dead people and vote for them?
Well, I'm not, I don't work in Chicago. I work in suburban Cook, but I will address that. Anybody who knows about a deceased voter might be able to find a way to request that ballot, but they would have to be able to forge that person's signature. And that's the protection that we have. And in fact, that's the same protection that occurs when you vote in person. When somebody comes into my polling place to vote, either early voting or on Tuesday, they sign in. I look at their signature and I compare it to the signature I have on my computer screen, which is how they signed when they registered. Those signatures have to match. If those signatures don't match, I'm going to look at that person and say, you're not the right person. And you know what? That never happens, because people don't show up and try and pretend to be somebody else. So the protections we have on mail ballots are the same exact protections we have on in-person voting. And there's jurisdictions that have used mail voting for many years, and there's no greater fraud in mail voting than there is in any other kind of voting, and there's no fraud of any significance in our voting system that is significant. Now, I will say we do know the largest source of vote fraud in the country, and it is in fact widows who send in ballots for their deceased husbands. It's extremely rare. It does happen once in a while. People have actually gone to jail for it, but it is so rare that it really doesn't matter.
And it is a felony if
Right.
you commit fraud voting.
Okay, what's the next one?
Just a comment. She says a friend of hers in the UK talked about this. All they use are paper ballots that come in the mail.
You know, those of us who run elections think that this is the right thing to do. It is so efficient. It is so much cheaper. You don't have to find 12,000 volunteers to man polling places and pay them. You don't have to have, Cook County just spent millions of dollars buying a new bunch of voting machines. You don't need any of that stuff if you vote by mail. Those states like Oregon and Washington that do all their voting by mail are saving a ton of money, and it is just as secure. That's why the folks in the election district, in the election business, are hoping that this is successful, so we can go back to Illinois and push for this kind of voting all the time. I would love it, you know, if we had most people voting by mail, and then we just have a few super sites for those people who insist they want to vote in person, and that would be fine. If we could get to the spot where, like other states, everybody votes by mail, I think that would be a great place for us to all go as a state.
I think that's all the questions.
All right, let's take the remaining few minutes to talk about getting out the vote. This is a historic year with our suffrage anniversary and our herstory. We know that suffrage is a privilege and a responsibility. And we certainly, if you've been hearing the stories about the final state of Tennessee, the one vote made the difference in Tennessee adopting the suffrage amendment. But the key point is democracy, like Jim and Ed said. Democracy requires active citizens. And this is just a brief chart. We find that voter turnout is influenced by family income. And this is just a little quick background. Voter turnout could be improved in those income levels, but overall, the US as a whole does a very poor job of turning out voters and registering citizens. So we have a lot of room to improve. And some of you heard stories about there were women in the suffrage era who went around Northern Illinois in a car talking to people around various towns, trying to get the voters' attention by this car parade. And they created a lot of interest in suffrage and talked to people locally. Could we do this today to get voters' attention? Or what about bicycle parades? Get your family and some signs. How can we use banners, flags, maybe yard signs? How about other ideas? Type your answers in the chat. We're going to try and do a lot in the last 3 minutes and get some ideas, because now you know how to get your vote out, how you can vote without worrying about the virus, and how to vote if you're worried about the post office. You can still use your vote by mail ballot and take it to the early voting site. So now that you have this information, we need to get other people's attention and share that information. And we may have to use some of these old-fashioned ways of doing it because we can't get together in person and we can't have a meeting about it or a rally. We have to use some of our other means of getting people's attention. So Jennifer or Cynthia, what's in the chat? Any good ideas? How do we get the voters' attention? We really need to get every vote out.
Well, I've commented, Elaine, that I put links about how to register to vote, and make sure to check your registration on Facebook and Twitter. So using social media.
Right. Does
Got a little
anybody
pushback
have,
from a couple people, but that's all right.
does
Stu Top agrees about social media.
what about yard signs or signs in your car window, decals? Banner, you could have a banner in your front of your bushes.
Yeah, I just picked up a bunch of yard signs for people in my precinct. As I call them, I ask them if they want a yard sign, and I picked up 5 for Sean Caston today. So
Yeah. And what about, I heard a lady was wearing one of her t-shirts and hiking around her, walking her neighborhood, just getting her exercise. But because she had her t-shirt on, people were waving and honking.
Harriet has the best idea for the day. She has a face mask that says vote.
All right. You
Yeah,
can tell she's a League of Women Voters person.
yeah, where do you get that?
I bet the league is selling them.
Oh, okay.
Loretta Pearson has a vote mask. Carol Kravickas has one. Everybody has a vote mask, it seems like.
All right.
Well, Wheaton League of Women Voters is selling them.
Oh, okay. Wheaton League of Women Voters.
All right.
I got mine, but you can get them online too.
Well, the other thing that we can use is our personal networks. And maybe as we're thinking about this, you can jot down a little plan of how many different networks do you have? You know, there's maybe college friends that you keep in touch with. They might even be in other states. If you have a fitness club that you know people from, church, fellow schoolmates, you know, parents of school children. What other networks are you part of? And how can you connect with them? Remember the old telephone trees? Maybe you have 5 people that you know that are pretty gung-ho, and you know that they want to encourage people to get out to vote. So call them and tell them everything you learned tonight and get them to commit to talking to 5 other people. There might be neighbors or people that are comfortable. You could have coffee in your yard patio out in the open air before it gets too cold. Or maybe Starbucks. There are people that you might get together person to person. And then there might be others that you could send a quick note. You know, send a card or maybe a postcard. So those are some ideas. Do you have some other ideas using your personal connections to get every person out to vote? Is there anything in the chat?
Marty has an idea that in this time when we're all on Zoom meetings every day, to remind people on every Zoom meeting that you attend.
Good idea. A, have you registered to vote? Have all your children and their grandchildren registered to vote? Whoever you're connected with. And I know we're running out of time, so
Oh, I know you can write letters to people that might vote. There's different organizations such as Sierra Club. Another way you can do that is seek out, there's different organizations that will call people that they think, you know, kind of like borderline voters, just to encourage them to vote. You know, you don't have to, you know, it'd be lovely to encourage them to vote the way you want them to, but you just, you know, just be non-biased and just say it's important to vote. But
well,
that's
and
a
if
couple other
you're
ways.
voting, if you're calling people that are members of the Sierra Club or the local environmental group, you know that they share values with you.
Well, they were, the Sierra Club, I don't know how they distinguished, but they said they found people that were kind of, they vote inconsistently. So they're just trying to make sure that these aren't members, that they will vote. And then I found another site where you would take, I think you could take a shift, you know, an hour or two shift, and they give you people that would call. And again, it's just people who are kind of on the fence. They voted in the past, but you know, just to encourage them to get out and vote.
Right.
So
So we need to wrap up. This is obviously a historic time, and our voters have a real choice in our presidential choices. And we also are voting not only for the top of the ballot, but for local county judges. So, and we have an amendment on the ballot in Illinois. So we really need to get out the vote. There are life and death issues involved, whether it's gun control, the environment, women's rights, healthcare rights, many things make a big difference, and you can vote your voice. And again, the final message, active citizens are democracy's lifeblood. So if you don't vote, democracy could die. And we thank you everyone for participating, especially Jim and Ed. Thank you so much for your expertise and spending your time with us.
Thanks
And
for hosting us.
Note, you're welcome. And a quick note about our upcoming programs. We'll have more detail on the Jane Addams website, but you can jot down these dates in November and December. But in October, we're hoping you are going to vote and encourage at least 10 other people to go get out the vote. Thank you.